Recently, we've received a series of customer complaints regarding the name Lowe's. A customer urges, "Stay away from Lowe's. I just bought a convection microwave and am having all sorts of problems with their installation, for which they take no responsibility." Others also expressed, "Lowe's has a strong self-service style. Cheap trinkets piled high in the aisles, making it impossible to navigate even for professionals. Lowe's only strength is having a wide variety of flexible power tool brands, yet they still manage to mess that up." What's really happening to this retail giant? From late 2024 to 2025, Lowe's quietly updated a series of internal policies regarding returns, marketplace items, membership programs, and credit cards. These changes won't be immediately noticeable, but by 2026, they could directly impact the customer experience. This is a quiet but deeply impactful change. Employees lose flexibility, customers lose familiarity, and every decision is pushed towards the system. The research question posed is Lowe's optimizing operations or sacrificing customer trust to control costs? On the surface, 2026 doesn't seem like the year Lowe's would announce a major policy overhaul. There were no shocking press releases. There are no mass emails sent to consumers. There is no specific day marked as the start of the new rules. But as we trace the data and operational changes in the 2024-2025 period, a different picture gradually emerges. Lowe's is undergoing a systemic, silent, but deliberate policy restructuring process. Instead of changing a major policy, Lowe's adjusted dozens of small points, shortening and categorizing return times by category. Clearly separate items sold by Lowe's and marketplace items. Standardize the membership program across multiple tiers of conditions. Limit the store employee's authority to handle exceptions. Each change, if taken individually, is like a small screw tightened another half turn. But when dozens of snails are tightened simultaneously, the entire operating mechanism begins to function according to a different logic. It becomes harder, tighter, and less flexible for humans. According to retail experts, this is a familiar reaction to cost pressures. Large returns are like a slow bleed on the balance sheet. Marketplaces help expand your catalog without needing inventory. Automation helps reduce the risk from emotional decisions. The problem isn't with the business goals, but with the speed and way these changes are layered on top of each other. By 2026, when the marketplace is large enough, when the refund system is tight enough, and when customers are forced to interact with the new policies more frequently, friction will begin to become apparent. This explains why customer confusion and anger didn't erupt immediately when the policy changed, but appeared later when all control layers were activated simultaneously. The investigative question at this point is no longer what policy changes did Lowe's make, but rather how will these small changes resonate as we head into 2026? And is Lowe's approaching a point where the customer experience is no longer understandable enough to maintain trust? In the next section, we will delve into the most specific policies that are causing the greatest friction and why they could become the focal point of customer anger in 2026. For decades, the return policy has been one of Lowe's greatest intangible assets. One thing is almost ingrained in consumer behavior. If you buy at Lowe's, you pay at Lowe's. But by 2026, this assumption began to crack, not because of a shocking decision, but because of the quiet fragmentation of the repayment system. When researching the current policies and procedures for handling goods, we realized that Lowe's no longer has a single return policy. Instead, there are multiple layers of overlapping laws depending on store type, Lowe's or Lowe's outlet, sales channel, in-store or marketplace product category, especially bulky appliances. If we compare the return experience to a traffic map, Lowe's has gone from a straight highway to a network of city streets with numerous turns and small signs. The problem isn't the presence of signs, but rather that drivers don't know which road they've turned onto. The biggest point of contention lies in the shortened return window for some products at Lowe's outlet, particularly appliances. Operationally, this is how Lowe's controls risk with high-value inventory. But in terms of experience, it creates a paradox. The larger and more complex the product, the shorter the time allowed to discover problems. The remarkable thing is that most consumers are unaware they are entering a different policy branch, even though they are still under the same Lowe's logo. More notably, store employees have increasingly less power to intervene. The decision to refund is no longer in human hands, but is locked within the system, where each transaction is cross-referenced against pre-programmed rails. This is the first minefield. It's not that Lowe's arbitrarily refused a refund, but that Lowe's designed a policy maze where taking a single wrong step means losing the right to turn back. In your opinion, what should a major brand prioritize more? Flexibility for customers or absolute system rigidity? And with the return policy so fragmented, the next question is, what happens when Lowe's expands its marketplace, where the seller is no longer Lowe's, but customer expectations remain the same? Perhaps Lowe's marketplace isn't a new concept in the retail industry. Amazon, Walmart, and many other major chains have been operating this model for years, opening their platforms, allowing third-party sales, and expanding their catalogs without holding inventory. But for Lowe's, marketplace is becoming one of the most dangerous policies heading into 2026, not because the model is wrong, but because of the gap between the system's structure and how customers perceive the brand. From the outside, it's true that everything still bears the mark of Lowe's. The Lowe's logo appears throughout. The website is lowes.com. Payment goes through the Lowe's system. But behind that facade, the seller could be a completely different legal entity with inconsistent processing, packaging, support, and response times. And of course, how would customers know those things? They assume they are buying from Lowe's, not a marketplace product. In a survey, very few consumers could read the text "sold by" followed by the company name. The only thing they read and believe is the familiar color of the brand. So when the incident happened, the natural reaction was to go back to Lowe's with the expectation of consistent service standards. Lowe's has tried to reduce friction by allowing marketplace returns in a store. But this policy creates a new paradox. The responsibility for experience is fragmented, while expectations are not. One analyst described the marketplace as a market built inside a supermarket. The stalls belong to many different owners, but the signs in front still only display one name. When there's a problem, buyers don't differentiate between counters. They go back to the central information counter. By 2026, as the marketplace continues to expand, the number of transactions not entirely controlled by Lowe's will increase, and the frequency of encounters with differences in quality and policies will also rise. And that's when the questions started coming more frequently. If I'm buying on Lowe's, why doesn't the experience feel like Lowe's? To what extent should a brand be responsible for what happens on its own platform? In the next section, we'll delve into the loyalty program and credit card, where Lowe's continues to stratify the experience and where complexity could become the next source of customer frustration in 2026. For years, Lowe's rewards program operated on a simple promise: buy more, get a direct discount, easy to understand and predict. But by the 2025-2026 period, this structure began to change, not with a dramatic turnaround, but through the quiet reconstruction of the entire loyalty and credit card system. Lowe's is gradually shifting its focus to MyLowe's rewards, while also restructuring the credit card lines associated with this program. Strategically, this is a familiar move in modern retail: collect more detailed behavioral data, classify customers based on long-term value, encourage targeted spending instead of across-the-board discounts. But from the consumer's perspective, the new system no longer resembles a rewards program, but rather a spreadsheet. Benefits are no longer available directly at the checkout counter, but depend on account type, membership level, eligible product categories, time, and form of payment. Imagine that in the past, discounts were like a big sign by the road, visible and easy to understand. For now, it's like a set of terms divided into many small tabs. Each tab only opens when you click in the right place. This stratification creates a cognitive blind spot. Customers don't realize they've entered a completely different mechanism until familiar benefits no longer appear automatically. For Lowe's, this is the way to optimize profit margins and control preferential costs. But for customers, the experience feels like a stretched entitlement, sometimes there, sometimes not, and difficult to predict. As we enter 2026, with more and more transactions flowing through the new loyalty system, the confusion doesn't stem from losing rewards entirely, but from no longer understanding why you are or are not eligible for them. In your opinion, what should a membership program prioritize more? Optimizing data for the business or absolute transparency for consumers? And as returns become fragmented, marketplaces expand, and loyalty grows increasingly complex, the next question is, what will happen when all these landmines detonate simultaneously in the 2026 shopping experience? To understand what's happening at Lowe's, you need to look beyond individual policies. The problem isn't with refunds, the marketplace, or loyalty, but with a fundamental shift in the operational model. For decades, Lowe's was built as a traditional hardware store: direct sales, complete value control, simple and predictable policies. But by the mid-2020s, this model began to show its limitations, and Lowe's is quietly transforming into something else: retail plus marketplace plus platform. In this model, where is Lowe's? Who are they? Lowe's is no longer just a seller, but rather a transaction facilitator, data controller. The designer of the game rules for multiple parties to participate. This difference is like going from running a family store to operating an airport. Not everyone flies with the same airline. Not everyone goes through the same gate. But they all operate under the same roof and follow a centralized control system. But why did Lowe's have to go in this direction? The answer lies in three major pressures squeezing the U.S. retail industry. First, the cost of repayment. Did you know that each major return is like pulling a heavy package backward through the entire logistics chain? The costs are not just in shipping, but also in inspection, rewarehousing, depreciation, and sometimes the goods are unsellable. In the context of thin profit margins, returns become a leak that needs to be controlled by systems, not by emotional flexibility. Second, competitive pressure from e-commerce platforms. The marketplace allows Lowe's to expand its inventory, such as opening hundreds of additional aisles in the store, without needing to build extra warehouse space. This is a reasonable capital strategy, but it comes at a cost. The experience is no longer uniform. And third, logistics and profit pressures. In the world of platforms, every exception is a variable that is difficult to control. Therefore, Lowe's chose to package the policy into fixed rules, integrated directly into the software, where the system always wins over humans. When you combine these three pressures, a clear logic emerges. Lowe's is not making things difficult for customers. They are optimizing the system to reduce risk, lower costs, and increase predictability. But it is precisely here that the central conflict forms. Lowe's has changed the system, but customers are still playing by the old rules. Customers enter with the expectations of a traditional store. One brand, or one responsibility, one invoice, or one policy, one problem, or one person can solve. Meanwhile, Lowe's is operating as a platform, a wide variety of sellers, many layers of regulation. The decision is in the algorithm. The confusion doesn't come from customers not reading the policy, but from the policy exceeding human intuitive memory capacity. Imagine playing a familiar game for 20 years. The law doesn't change on paper, but with each round, the system automatically adds a small rule. At some point, you don't lose because you played wrong, but because you no longer know which version you're playing. This is why, by 2026, anger began to manifest significantly. It's not because Lowe's did a single wrong thing, and because the entire experience has slipped out of the realm of easy understanding for the general public. The important question is, can a mass market retail brand operate as a technology platform while still maintaining the trust built on simplicity? And in the next part, we'll move from system analysis to forecasting the 2026 scenario. What happens if Lowe's continues on its current trajectory, and what are the most irreversible consequences for customers? When a system becomes complex, the solution is no longer about avoiding purchases, but about buying with a map. As Lowe's enters 2026 with a tiered operating model, consumers can no longer rely on old habits or familiar assumptions. Instead, Lowe's needs to be approached as an ecosystem with its own rules for each area. First principle, always identify who you are trading with. The same product, the same website, but with different wording like sold by Lowe's or the name of a third party represents two different policy worlds. If you consider Lowe's an airport, this is the step where you determine which airline you're flying with before asking about baggage or changing tickets. Second principle, inspection time is inversely proportional to product size. Bulky items like household appliances can no longer be left for a few days and then dealt with. Consider the period immediately after receiving the goods as a technical window, or where any issues need to be detected, recorded, and addressed as early as possible before the system automatically closes the options. Third principle, an outlet is not a cheaper version of a regular store, but rather a different policy branch. Lower prices come with stricter conditions. The important question isn't whether it can be answered, but how long it takes to answer, where it's answered, and under what conditions. This is not an injustice, but an implicit contract that buyers need to read carefully. Fourth principle, with loyalty and credit cards, never rely on memory. Current benefits are no longer a fixed number, but rather the result of many intersecting conditions. Asking before paying is not ignorance, but the only way to avoid misunderstandings. All these principles can be summed up in one sentence. At Lowe's, old assumptions are becoming new hidden costs. And here's the key point. Lowe's doesn't hide its policy, it fragments it. The problem isn't the small print, but the fact that no one tells you which parts to read. In your opinion, should the responsibility for understanding the law lie with the buyer? Or should a public brand keep everything simple enough that a survival guide isn't needed? In the final section, we'll conclude the picture with a 2026 forecast. If Lowe's doesn't adjust its policy communication, what will happen to customer trust? And will today's confusion become tomorrow's crisis? What's happening at Lowe's isn't a single mistake, but the predictable consequence of a deep transformation process. From a traditional retailer, Lowe's is evolving into a complex platform where data, systems, and automated rules are gradually replacing familiar flexibility. The issue isn't whether these policies are right or wrong from a business perspective. The problem lies at the intersection of the company's strategy and the expectations of millions of customers who are still approaching Lowe's with an old mindset. When the rules of the game change faster than human perception can keep up, confusion is inevitable, and anger often follows. 2026, therefore, is not just a milestone. That could be the clearest manifestation of the frictions that have been silently accumulating over many years. What do you think about this direction Lowe's is taking? Is this a necessary adaptation of modern retail? Or is it a sign that major brands are straying too far from the human experience? If you've ever shopped at Lowe's, especially in the last few years, please share your experience in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue following similar topics. The content in this video is based on public information, analysis of retail industry trends, and an independent journalistic perspective. Video does not represent any organization or individual, nor is it intended to attack or make accusations. Any predictions about 2026 are speculative, not definitive statements about the future. Viewers should consider this a reference for understanding the context, not as a shopping or financial advice. Thank you for staying with me until the end. See you in the next videos.